Do Samsung's latest phablets deliver premium value?
And can you keep your power bill in check with Belkin's WeMo Insight?
Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Alex Kidman, and I'm joined by a man who's recently been hired to helm the next 3 Star Wars movies, Darth Turner. Darth, what's happening in tech news?
Aussie streaming video service QuickFlix has abandoned plans to acquire a Chinese movie studio. The streaming video pioneer says it's still pursuing other deals in an effort to shore itself up in its battle against Netflix, Presto and Stan.
The ACCC has given its tick of approval to TPG's plan to buy iiNet. There were competitive concerns raised by some, but the ACCC didn't see it that way, although it did state that any future takeovers of this size would probably be of competitive concern.
Australian online video service EasyFlix has abruptly shut up shop, leaving customers who purchase movies in the lurch. Thankfully, if you redeemed an ultraviolet code on a DVD or Blu-ray, you can transfer that ultraviolet movie to another service.
NBN, that's the company charged with building the new multi-technology mix NBN, has released its first end of financial year report, giving itself a big pat on the back for doubling the number of premises passed, although not all premises passed have actually taken up an NBN connection. Roughly speaking, if you're on an NBN connection, it's 80% likely that you're on a fibre connection. That number will of course drop as they start rolling out fibre to the node connections, with the remaining smaller percentages made up of course of satellite and fixed wireless customers. There's still no official launch date on when fibre to the node services will roll out, however.
So Alex, should we be happy with these figures that we're getting from the NBN?
You know that old saying about, lies, damn lies and statistics?
Yes. Being a tech journo, very much I do, yes.
Yeah, I think it really applies here. Look, I mean, on the surface of it, there are more NBN connections than there were a year ago, and that's a good thing. Anything that improves Australian broadband is a good thing for all sorts of reasons that I suspect the audience watching and listening to this will already know. So yes, there's some good news here. Equally, there's a bunch of news that kind of suggests, and it's difficult because you don't have the exact figures for other types of rollouts or for what might have happened if they'd continued with fibre or those kinds of scenarios. But there's definitely some points where things are not quite where they should be or where they were promised to be. I mean, in theory, we were meant to get a 2016 promise of 25 meg for all Australian households. That's just totally not going to happen.
Not going to happen. Yeah.
So many other small promises have been thrown out by the wayside in terms of minimum guarantees and percentages of certain technology mixes. They've really only trialled fibre to the node, and that's problematic in terms of its longer-term rollout. At the same time, though, it's exactly what they actually have to do. In order to ensure that it's going to work properly, you can't just go, right, a cabinet on every corner and we'll just run it up to the copper. Yeah. It doesn't work that way. It's much more complicated than that. And it's exactly the kind of stuff, oddly enough, that the fibre rollout was being criticised for. The fibre rollout was slow, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. One thing you can say without any doubt is that if the government was in opposition, they'd be telling us that these were bad numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
Whichever side you're on determines whether or not these numbers look good.
Yeah. So some of that comes down to spin. The technical reality is, look, Australian broadband has improved because there are that many more households actually connected, although the numbers that have connected versus the numbers that could have connected are still kind of worryingly low. On the flip side of that, though, of course, the actual trend is for people to take up much faster connections. All those saying that, the 12.1 connection will be enough for the majority of Australians. No, look, the people who are taking these services up, and they are increasing, there are now hundreds of thousands of them, are largely taking up the 50 meg or 100 meg connections and using them. The data spikes are really quite significant. And that's in line with everything else that you might expect of broadband going forward.
So Alex, we have new smartphones and phablets from Samsung, and some of them are curved, but when we say curved, we don't mean curved to like this kind of curve, do we? What are we talking about here?
No, well, what we're talking about, and this is on one of the 2 models. So Samsung has introduced 2 new 5.7-inch phones, the Galaxy Note 5 and the Galaxy S6 Edge Plus. Now, you might recognise that the Galaxy S6 Edge is a very difficult thing to say.
Yes.
But that the Galaxy S6 Edge came out earlier in the year. This is the S6 Edge Plus. It's a 5.7-inch variant of that phone, but it's got the same innards, more or less, as the Note 5. So they're kind of complementary to each other, and it's kind of confusing, and it's terribly hard to say.
Hang on, how big is the Note 5?
They're both 5.7 inch, so they're both quite large. I mean,
so the line between smartphone and phablet is kind of gone here, because I always thought Note was a phablet and Edge was a phone. But you're telling me they're exact same damn size.
They're exact same damn size, they're exact same damn internals, except that this, while it looks kind of like the Note, doesn't have the little stylus, the S Pen, which you can now do a few cool things with the Note 5 if you're interested in the S Pen. And a lot of the indication is that a lot of people aren't. A lot of people were buying these because they thought, I want a really large screen phone. I want something that's almost tablet-esque.
Yeah.
I don't really care about the pen. It's just going to sit there. So there's that choice there, which is nice, although within the Australian context, we've got one very limiting choice to deal with, and that's to do with the storage on board these units.
Why? What have we got? What did we miss out on?
Okay, so both of them are completely sealed units. Sealed batteries, sealed storage. Same as the S6 was. This is the way that Samsung's decided to go for premium devices. It's very Apple-esque, although, you know, obviously don't tell the lawyers that. They'll get all... They'll get all...
You didn't hear anything.
Yeah. So they're completely sealed storage, so you can't add storage easily.
Yeah.
Now, for the S6 Edge Plus, you can get it with 32 gig or 64 gig. The Note 5 comes in 32 gig and 64 gig, but not in Australia. The official Australian version is the 32 gig version only.
Do we have a proper explanation for this?
No, we don't. I've asked Samsung directly, and they've said, consumer demand suggests that there isn't a need for a 64 gig Note 5, and that people put it all on the cloud. Yeah, no, I'm not.
So then why do you sell one overseas and not here?
Even buying, yeah, because it exists.
Yeah.
And I mean, the reality there is, as long as the bands are compatible, you can expect the usual direct importers to be selling the 64 gig version. But it's still disappointing that they haven't opted to sell that unit here, especially because in almost every other aspect, this is a really nice phone. It's actually surprised me a lot. The S6 Edge, which was the counterpoint to the S6, which they announced back at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, didn't thrill me because you were paying a bit more for a slightly nicer design. And look, in some aspects, yeah, this is still true with this thing because it's still that nicer design, but scaling it up aesthetically somehow to me makes it more appealing. I like that curve, although its appeal is largely just in the aesthetic.
So what do you mean by curve? You don't mean curve like a curved TV or like the LG phones that were actually curved this way. What do you mean by curve?
It's the reverse. There is a subtle curve that runs down each side of the phone. Now, on one side of the phone, that's just aesthetic. On the other, they have a quick slider for either your most frequent contacts or your most frequent apps. They're still not really doing enough with this in a software sense to justify it. I mean, the contacts isn't bad, and they had that on the S6 Edge. The apps thing is not terrible. It works, but it's functionally kind of pointless because if it's your favorite app, if it's an app you're going to run all the time, you just have it on your home screen.
It's on the home screen anyway. So what you're saying
you tap
is
it,
that the screen actually curves off the
twice
edge of the device.
Yes, it does.
The edge is now part of the screen.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Thus the name.
They've had that.
Right.
Yes,
they've
had that since the curved Note that they released alongside the Note 4 last year.
Yeah.
At a premium price. So they've been doing this fairly much solo for some time, and I don't know if that's just patents. I don't know if the rest of the market looked at it and gone, well, it's a bit gimmicky, and in some ways it is. But in some ways, for a premium device these days, given how good even the mid-range Android devices are, for a premium device, you actually do want something, I think, that is going to stand out, that is going to have that, here is a device that has aesthetic appeal. Everyone talks about how Apple has, such great design credential and ideas. And I think, to be fair, I think they do have some wonderful designers on board, albeit they're stuck on iterating on the same design idea over and over and over again. But they're not the only players in the game who can make something that looks really rather nice and works very, very well. This is a very fast phone. It's got a great little camera, very solid battery life. But being a premium device, you pay more than $1,000 for it, and that's kind of painful. So, Adam, you're a man of rare insight.
Oh, yes, I am. That's why they pay me the big bucks.
You've been playing with a different kind of insight recently, the Belkin WeMo Insight. Tell us about it.
Well, Belkin's had their WeMo stuff for a while. It's basically smart home gear. Originally, there was a smart switch. So you plug this adapter into the wall, you plug your heater into that, and then you can switch the power off remotely. Or you can say, I want you to come in at 9 o'clock in the morning, or I want you to come on at sunrise. You can even get it to talk to something like If This Then That, which is a cloud service, and do fancy ass things like, if it's going to be under 15 degrees this morning, I want you to come on. So really nice home automation stuff, and a fairly low barrier to entry. You're not paying someone thousands of dollars to rewire your home, and you're not getting into the really expensive stuff. They've then fleshed
by
this
and
out.
large, it's just plug and play. They've got a few light switches, which you do need a Sparky to install, but otherwise it's pretty much plug it into the wall, connect it to your home wireless network.
Pretty much. And then you can control it from an Apple or Android smartphone or tablet. And as you say, they started with a switch, then they added light bulbs, light switches, they've got cameras, motion sensors. So a nice little family of devices that can all tie to each other and trigger events. Like you can tell the motion detector that if you see something move, then I want you to turn that switch on over there, or I want you to turn that switch off. So you can build a bit of intelligence and actually get to that next level of smart home where it's not just you turning things on and off remotely, but it's your house actually making smart decisions on your behalf. And like I said, it's a nice little system. Now, the WeMo Insight is basically one of these WeMo wall switches that you can turn on and off. But sorry, I shouldn't say wall switch because that sounds like you've got to get it installed. It's a plug that goes into your power point, and then your device goes into that. So it's a thing that sits in the middle. The difference between this and the basic switch is that this one's also an energy monitor. So you can look at it, it will tell you how many watts your whatever's plugged into it is currently using, and you can do a couple of clever things, like you can export that data, or you can say, if the wattage gets below a certain level, then I want you to turn it off. And that's really useful for standby things, because I've been testing it out and I figured out that my television uses 240 watts when it's on and 27 watts on standby. So you could set up a fancy rule through something like If This Then That says, when this television is using less than 50 watts of power, therefore it's in standby, once it's been doing that for 30 minutes, kill the power to it completely. So that way you're not wasting energy and money on that standby power, which slowly sort of chews through your power bill. So
yeah, it's an interesting approach. I mean, Belkin's had Insight devices before. It's had complete Insight ranges. This is the first time, though, they've integrated it within the WeMo experience, which is wonderful when it works, frustrating when it doesn't. And as with anything home automation, there can be that kind of mix of, does the app see it, does the app not see it? Fun and games. By and large, it's quite reasonable. Now, how much does the thing run?
Well, this thing costs $100, and the standard switch is $70. Now, I think you need to have a business case, even if it's for home. I think you need to have a business case as to why you want to spend the extra $30, because probably all you're spending the money on is knowing how much money you're saving. If you tell it, right, I want you to switch my TV off for 6 hours in the middle of the night and kill the power to save me some money, right? The $70 switch will do that. All the $100 switch will do is tell you how much money you've saved. So you've spent more money to find out what you've saved, which is a bit odd to me. But the nice thing is, if you're using that standby power threshold to actually trigger events, when this device is using this much power, then I want you to do something else. That's, to me, when it makes the most sense, because you can't do that with the other gear.
See, to me, where this makes sense, and I do like this, is if you've got an existing family of WeMo devices, if you're integrating it within existing WeMo stuff. I wouldn't buy one of these as an absolute standalone product unless you were planning on, because WeMo's quite modular, unless you were planning on building out that kind of WeMo system throughout your house. Because as you say, I mean, it's a $30 premium, and for around $30, and maybe even probably closer to $20, you can pick up a simple power meter that will tell you this
stuff. $22. I already looked it up, and it will tell you. As
there's
you
a
say.
few. There are a few different models at around that kind of price point.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, that's not so much of a premium above the existing Switch as it is, and that knowledge is quite powerful, even if you do mix and match it. Even if you just use it to say, right, well, how much is that home entertainment system using? How much is that heater using? Should I be switching from that heater to that heater to that fan? Where are all my devices actually adding up to my power bill? Because, I mean, one thing that almost everyone bitches about is the amount that they pay on their power bills. So knowing where your weak points are, using something like this, and it doesn't have to be this, it can be your $20 to $30 meter, is quite useful. Where I think the WeMo has a little bit of an edge over your $20 thing is most of those have a small inbuilt display on the plug itself, which is a bit of a problem if you want to get a bit of a long-term pattern of your usage. And you got to lean down behind your TV, and maybe the plug's down behind the wall.
Try
and
not
you can't
to unplug
see
the TiVo and electrocute yourself.
Exactly,
and the things I do
exactly.
every night,
Whereas this, it's as long as it's working, it's just a question of, right, where's my phone? Click, right, it's using this much power, it's used this much today, it's used this much this month.
But you've
And I
then
think
got to
that gives it a
translate
lot
that
of
knowledge
flexibility.
into action or savings to make it worth it. And that's the main thing, I think, is that if you're going to get one of these, you actually need to sit down first and think about what you're going to do with it. Even if I turned my home entertainment system off for 12 hours a day, I would save, I figured out, about $3 a month on my power bill.
But if it's only one thing, then yeah, fine, you're only saving you $3 or whatever. If you plug it in across multiple devices, now that does involve moving it around, I grant you.
Yes.
Then you can gather more information about how your house is working and where you can save that money. I think for the premium ads over the Switch, as long as the Switch itself is useful to you, I think it's a worthwhile buy within a plan to build a WeMo ecosystem, because like everyone else, Belkin has WeMo and that's its home automation thing. Other companies have different takes on home automation, some of them built around standard, some of them built around proprietary stuff, some of which will talk to other stuff, but most won't. And you've got to, at this stage, unfortunately, you've pretty much got to commit. So if you're going to commit to this, it only makes sense if you're doing it in a fully WeMo-centric way. Well, that just about wraps it up for another episode of Vertical Hold. Thanks for watching, and remember, if you've got any feedback, hit us up via YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter.
Thanks for joining us. Remember, if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button.